Panels, notice scholarships for far too long has been a tool for oppression, responsible for the shackling of the poor, intimidation, and systemic oppression that unfortunately falls on rich students. We prefer a world where scholarships should be given to those who truly deserve it, not a world of oppression and abuse. Let the motion forward. But first, let's clarify something. How do we define financial necessity? It's measured on your economic capability. This means that we would give scholarships to those worse off financially. Our stance is simple. We believe scholarships should only be granted on the basis of financial necessity. Our main goal is to give the same opportunities to the most vulnerable, but we also do think that we can also help governments. We can help students from wealthy families and institutions at the end of the day. More on that in my argument. So, two arguments that I'd like to answer. First, on why is this new metric principally aligned and justified for scholarships? Secondly, why do we help students from wealthy families? And how do we cater to the interest of donors, which includes the government and institutions? But first argument, why is this principally aligned and justified for scholarships? Why is this new metric aligned? Two layers. First, what are scholarships and what metric do they use? Panels, notice that scholarships are subsidies for education that is extremely expensive. So what are the incentives for scholarships? We give you two things. First, maybe these donors are from heart or just have a genuine connection to these students, like both being minorities or prior coming from the same background. But secondly, a bit on the pragmatic side, these institutions, either educational or government, wants to put an investment to these students. More on why this policy aligns with their incentives on my second argument. But we think that there are a few metrics they use for scholarships. First is on the idea of birth factory or intelligence. This is to say that entering a scholarship program requires tons of resources. This means providing the right diet, the right infrastructure, the right training program for the ultimate result of the child. Because at the end of the day, scholarships grade intelligence, and we think that there are lots of resources that comes for it. So second layer as to why we believe that the fundamental idea of scholarships is to maximize the uniqueness of an individual. So why are scholarships so important then? First, they are the gateways to higher quality education. Secondly, you get to increase your uniqueness. This means finding and enriching your skills and knowledge that is exclusive to education. Thirdly, your value gives you more opportunities, and it's what liberates you to have higher paying jobs, afford better housing, to finally get out of that ghetto that you've been living for the past decade. So why are poor people systematically left out? We give you three reasons. First, students from poor families don't have the financial capability to afford training programs. They require government aid subsidies that often do not provide scholarships as well. But what's more ironic, government-funded schools in Indonesia, for instance, are often overworked and are equipped with minimally trained teachers because teachers now see that these schools are often their last resort if all plans fail for their workforce, right? Panels. Secondly, why poor people are systematically left out, because the metrics of scholarships in the status quo are unreliable and often discriminatory. What does this mean? Students from poor families often have to work part-time jobs outside of school hours to help pay their tuition fees or just have dinner on that table, while students from well-off families have the privilege of world-class tutoring, which would enable them to have more deliberate learning. This is exclusive from poor families, right? Panels. But thirdly, without this scholarship, poor people will continue to stay on the foot of society. We think that opposition might come here and say that poor families' solution is on welfare. Well, we'll give you two reasons as to why it won't work, and it has never worked before in the status quo right now. First, welfare just fulfills their basic needs, right, panels? But secondly, it doesn't allow them to diversify or start their own business, for instance, or pursuing their core talents for higher paying jobs. Notice that in status quo right now, they're just giving fish to fishermen without teaching them on how to fish to afford their lives themselves. We think that is the fundamental flaw in status quo. Therefore, the main metric should be financial necessity, because above all else, they have always been systematically disadvantaged, and the scholarship can give them the economic liberation that they always ask for, right, panels, which is not given, which is exclusive to education, and welfare doesn't solve this. So to our second argument as to why do we help students from well-off families and how do we cater to the interest of these donors. Two layers. What is the urgency coming from well-off families, and why? And second layer is to why do we still align with our donors. But let's go to our first layer as to what is the urgency coming from well-off families. Notice, panels, that we believe that their goal for well-off families is not for economic means. We believe that they can afford these schools, but we believe that they're still fighting for this scholarship in the means of showing off, in the means of the showing off trend we see in rich families. Three reasons why this is harmful. First, their ego falls to the shoulders of their children, right, panels? So this means pushing them harder and harder and harder because they just don't want to lose with their rich friends, right, panels? Secondly, their selfishness robs those truly in need. Third, they systematically oppress the poor of society. We think your fundamental right to feel short-term pride is secondary to first. First, the mental and physical safety of your child. Secondly, it's secondary to the lifelong necessity of the most vulnerable in society. It's secondary to the future of the right to life of a family in the ghettos, right, panels? We think that that is the fundamental principle we stand on. Therefore, the right of short-term pride is always secondary to those two fundamental things. So second layer, why do we still align with our donors? Two key actors that we challenge LO to answer. First is on the government. The key principal role of the government is to help its people, right, panels? Few reasons why this aligns with the basic premise. First, governments can finally solve the root problem of systemic oppression. Secondly, the need of welfare would systematically decrease from the rising poor class of society. This also means that they can be more ambitious in their campaign programs, for instance, that can boost their popularity and electability in the next election, right, panels? Because now poor people can diversify in their skills and maybe set off their new business, right, panels? But thirdly, we can help systemic oppression of students in rich families. At least now, rich students won't suffer from depression, won't suffer from abuse from their wealthy parents just because they have that egocentrical principle, that egocentrical human nature that they have, which falls unfortunately to rich students that actually can afford, but they choose to abuse more on their children. We think that that is unjustified in all of its forms. But second key actor is on institutions. Three reasons why we cater to the interest. First, they can help the correct group of society and possibly see more drastic change. We can at least give them more fulfillment and a sense of accomplishment that these institutions can now help poor people if that is their incentives, right, panels? Secondly, in pragmatic cases, these institutions can charge more on rich families compared to the inability of charging poor families, right, panels? So educational institutions might get more profit from charging more rich families, right, panels? But thirdly, they can come up with narratives that promote their popularity. For instance, this institution can now support that, oh, I've helped this poor man, now he's a rich businessman, right, panels? So what's the comparative on our side? Let's put the nail on the coffin. On our side, we told you that we can solve oppression and increase flexibility in the social class for the most vulnerable. This results to three things. First, more liberty and movement in society. They don't have to be stuck in low-paying jobs and ghettos. Second, governments can slowly put off welfare and therefore increase their ambitious campaign programs to boost their electability and popularity, right, panels? But thirdly, these help students from rich egocentric environments can now have the freedom they always wanted. Therefore, with all those reasons, I'm so proud to propose, let the motion through.